labas tariu mūsų klausytojams ir žiūrovams. Šiandieną vėl mes turime seriją nuotoliu. Šiandieną aš grįžau į savo universitetinį miestą Bolonijoje, o jūs, Žygi, kaip visad kovojat mūsų visuose frontuose ir ypač vakarų pusrutulyje. Šiandieną esate Majamie, saugumo konferencijoje. Tai gal pirmą papasakokit klausytojams, kur būtent esat, ką veikit ir kas per konferenciją. Ir tada mes galėsime įvažiuoti ir pakalbėti būtent apie tai, ką jūs išgirdote būtent ten.
Jau 5 metus aš čia atvažiuoju, kas įdomu, su Švedijos moderatais, kurie surenka visus mūsų krikščionių demokratų partijos tokius, galima sakyti, kovotojus už laisvės iš Europos, iš Ukrainos, iš Sakartvelo, iš Moldovos, iš Vokietijos, Ispanijos, iš visų šalių, kur mes esam, ir sujungia čia Majamyje su, galima sakyti, nuosaikiais Makeino stiliaus, Reigano, Bušo jaunojo stiliaus respublikonais, kurie, piktinasi dabartinę Trumpo politiką, nes, matai, jie patys buvo dalis proceso, kuris mums atvėrė kelius į NATO. Ir kaip vakar teisingai pasakė, jeigu jie nebūtų to padarę, šiandien mes, Vincentai, su tavim nekalbėtume. Mes būtume kažkur Sibire ar po asfaltu, nes tikėtina, kad jeigu NATO nebūtų įsiplėtusi Baltijos šalis, tai Rusija pirmiausia būtų puolus mus, o ne Ukraina. Ir, matydami, kad tai yra sėkmės istorija, jie bando Vašingtoną įtikinti, kad negalima taip elgtis su Ukraina. Ką Vašingtonas daro jau dešimtmečiais, ne tik Trumpo metu, įvairių prezidentų, Bušo vyresnio, Clintono ir kitais metu. Ir kaip vakar pasakė ambasadorius Kurtas Volkeris, viena NATO atstovė čia atvažiavusi pasakė, nėra kol kas konsensuso dėl Ukrainos narystės NATO, Kurtas atsisuko į ją ir taip ramiu amerikietišku balsu, žinot ką, ponia, jeigu amerikiečiai pasakytų taip, tai konsensusas atsirastų kaip mat. Mes tai padarėme dėl Baltijos šalių, nieks jūsų nenorėjo, mes pasakėm, Bušas pasakė taip ir teko kitiems pritarti. Tai jis sako, kad ir kiti, ir Damon Wilsonas, ir kiti, David Krameris, kuriuos irgi išgirsite pas mus tinklalaidėje, jie sako, neįmanomų dalykų nėra, reikia tiesiog normaliai dirbti. O tuo labiau, kad, supranti, Trumpas visą tai daro visose kitose regionuose. Majamis, tu neįsivaizduoji, kaip juda, norėdamas iki vidutinės trukmės rinkimų, visi šitie laisvi kubiečiai, kurių čia yra 2 milijonai pabėgusių iš salos nuo komunistų, jie tiki, kad jie grįš į salą už kelių mėnesių.
Už kelių mėnesių. Taip, ir taip pat šiandienos tinklalaidėje turime trumpą pranešimą iš būtent Kubos opozicijos, tiksliau, aišku, išeivijoje, bet opozicijos atstovės, Žygi, pasakysit jos vardą, pavardę, bet iš tiesų įdomu išgirsti tai, kad yra tas, sakykime, jau revoliucinis jausmas Majamyje ir tuos užuominos, kad gali atsitikti kažkas ar su kariniam taktikom Kuboje, būtent keičiant režimą. Tai kas vyksta ir kokie tie užkulisiniai pokalbiai ir kaip jie skamba Majamyje dabar tarp būtent Kubos diasporos? Ar teko išgirsti kažką tokio įdomaus?
Teko ir labai dažnai buvo minimas Lietuvos vardas. Visai neseniai tam pačiam Floridos universitete su panašia grupė žmonių susitiko mūsų ministras Kęstutis Budrys, kurį būtent dėl paramos Kubos laisvei priėmė Kubos kilmės valstybės sekretorius Marko Rubio, kuriam tai yra gyvenimo svajonė. Viskas. Tai yra jo pagrindinė misija sugrąžinti laisvę į Kubą ir tai respublikonai irgi skaičiuoja. Kol kas jie turi totalią daugumą atstovų rūmuose ir senate, ne totalią, bet turi. Ir turi Trumpo administracija, kuri pasiryžusi nukalti režimą, taip kaip pašalino Maduro, ar kaip toliau, taip sakant, bando trypti žemę ajatolas. Bet esminis tikslas šių respublikonų yra Kubos laisvė. Ir jie puikiai supranta, kad jie turi kelis mėnesius. Matai, jeigu tikėtina atstovų rūmai pereis į demokratų rankas. Senate dabar respublikonai turi 3-2 balsų persvarą. 3 jie jau praras. Manoma, kad gali prarasti ir 4 ir 5. Ką tai reiškia, Vincentai? Prasidės tyrimai, prasidės milžiniškos kongreso kovos su Trumpu ir bet kokios karinės ar kitokios operacijos, jos gali būti žymiai sunkesnės. Tai reiškia, Kubos laisvėj liko, šiandien mes esam balandį, gegužė, birželis, liepa, rugpjūtis, 4-5 mėnesiai, kad tai vyktų. Ir šitie kubiečiai, Roza María Payá konkrečiai, jinai yra viso, kaip tu esi JKL lyderis, taip jinai yra viso lotynų pasaulio organizacijos jaunimo vadovė. Ir jinai jau ruošia komandas profesionalų, kurie transformuos Kubą. Faktiškai jaunieji ministrai ruošiami, įsilavinę Amerikoje ir kitose laisvose šalyse. O matai, tėvelis tos lyderis jaunos Osvaldo Payá buvo nužudytas. Jis buvo toks kaip, galima sakyti, magiaras Vengrijos, bet jisai buvo Castro režimo tiesiog nužudytas. Jisai kovojo Kuboje ir ten įvyko nelaimingas atsitikimas su jo automobiliu, bet viskas aišku, kas jį padarė. Tai, pažiūrėsim, ar tai vyks, bet labai svarbu suprasti tiems lietuviams, kurie dažnai kritikuoja Lietuvą dėl paramos Kubai, kad tie žmonės, kurie nekenčia komunistų, jie lygiai taip pat nekenčia komunistų Pekine, nes šiandien susitiksiu su kongresmenu Mario Diaz Balart, kuris yra Taivano grupės pirmininkas, ir jie lygiai taip pat nekenčia Trumpo administracijos manevrų, šito appeasemento, šito šiltų apsikabinimų su Lukašenka ir Putinu, nes jie puikiai supranta, kas Kubos režimą remia per visą tą laiką. Rusai. Visų pirma, rusai.
Taip, tai aš dar prieš užbaigiant turiu kelis pastebėjimus. Iš vienos pusės, ypač šiandienos serijoje, iš pokalbių su amerikonais, ypač su ambasadoriumi Kurtu Volkeriu, labai girdisi šitas retorikos pasisukimas, kur gal anksčiau ir net prieš metus, ir net taip jau ir toli, net taip jau ir senai, tiksliau, girdėjosi kažkiek čia bandymas paaiškinti ir iš dalies pateisinti dabartinės administracijos strategiją, kurios atrodo kaip ir nėra ypač, sakykime, toks šizofreninis nesupratimas, kaip reikia dirbti su Rusija, kaip reikia dirbti su šitais autoritariniais režimais. Tai man buvo labai įdomu išgirsti Kurto būtent šitą retorinį pasikeitimą, jeigu galima taip įvadinti. Bet ką norėjau paklausti ir truputį paprovokuoti. Mes galime labai daug ko norėti iš Kubos, norime išlaisvinti Kubą, bet kai mes žiūrime kaip pavyzdį šitą ypač dabartinį klausimas, ar nepasisekusi karinį veiksmą Irane, ar ne? Mes labai norime, kad šitas dabartinis baisus režimas Irane kristų, bet atrodo, kad kartais gali taip atrodyti, kad amerikonai neturėjo tokio pilnai užtikrinto plano, kuris leistų Irano tautai sukilti prieš režimą, ar ne? Atrodo, kad dabar tas režimas gali išlikti. Tai iš esmės klausimas toks, ar gali būti, kad tas pats įvyks ir Kubos atveju, ar čia yra jau kitas reikalas? Ir atrodo, kad būtent, kai jūs kalbate su Kubos išeivija, jie realiai ruošia šitos naujus ministrus ir panašiai. Bet man asmeniškai ir manau daugam būtų šita baimė, kad bus panašus scenarius, kaip ir buvo su kova prieš Iraną. Kaip jūs manote?
Iš tikrųjų, kiekviena situacija yra kitokia. Kubiečiai labai aiškiai mums vakar sakė, mes tikrai nesutiksime su Venesuelos visų pirma variantu, mes neleisime, kad ten būtų kažkokia lėlė režimo, kuri valdys, nes, mes čia 7 beveik dešimtmečius laukiam šito momento, mes esam pasiruošę, mes esam daug gabesni, mes esam įsilavinę geriausiuose universitetuose. Floridos universitete yra didžiausias teisės fakultetas pastatytas šito kongresmeno Mario tėvelio, kuris buvo labai artimas, artimas giminystės ryšiais Castro jis buvo įtakingas žiauriai, dėl to Castro išmetė visą jo šeimą. Tai jie nesutiks su Venezuelos variantu, o dėl Irano jie tolo aš dar palaukčiau. Matai, vis tiek karinė jėga amerikiečių yra tokia, kad, iš esmės jai nėra lygių, o Trumpas negali nusileisti ir pralaimėti, nes jis gali pralaimėti viską. Aš manau, dabar su Iranu tiesiog pradeda judėti ne ginklai, bet ekonomika. Tai, ką daro dabar amerikiečiai, man labai primena Reigano politiką Sovietų Sąjungos laikais. Jie bando užgesinti ją ekonomiškai, žiūrėk, blokuojami uostai, nafta yra absoliučiai ten 60-80% Irano kraujo paties, realas jų yra kritęs vertė 95%. Ten faktiškai nėra pinigų, nėra atlyginimų, rezervai sumažėja nuo 200 milijardų iki 20, o vien tuos visus teroristus išlaikyti, Hezbollah, Hamas ir Hučius, jiems kainuodavo apie 16 milijardų per metus. Tai faktiškai jie bankrote. O kai mulos bankrote, kai pinigai nelaiko režimo, tai atsiprašau, kas jį laiko? Tai tada žmonės išeina į priekį, pilvai suveikia. Taip suveikia ir Sovietų Sąjungoje. Niekas ten per daug ten tų idealistų, disidentų buvo, kaip visada, mažuma. Dauguma sėdėjo ir laukė, o kai suprato, kad jau nebegali išgyventi, tada įvyko kažkas. Tai manau, kad taip įvyks. Tik tai mano klausimas vėl, kodėl Trumpas nemato šitame visame paveiksle Putino? Juk Putinas leidžia Irano ajatoloms žudyti amerikiečius tam tikrose Amerikos bazėse artimuosiuose rytuose ir kažkodėl nepagiria ukrainiečių, kurie fantastiškai suteikia savo antidronus ir visokius kitokias priemonės, kurios pačios geriausios nukala visus šitos teroristų, iraniečių ir kitokių ten. Ir ukrainiečiai, kiek čia tų istorijų prisiklausiau, kiek jie Sirijoje, kiek jie ten visose tose baisiose teritorijose ukrainiečiai veikia kaip milžiniška jėga. Tai, kaip ir Krameris pasakė, milžiniška gėda. Senate yra surinkti parašai daugumos senatorių ir kongresmenų dėl tų Grahamo sankcijų Rusijai, bet kodėl po Vilnių jos neįvedamos. Ir kaip Krameris pasakė, matai, net jeigu europiečiai auginasi tos karinius raumenis, rusai nežiūri į tos europiečius, jie žiūri tik, ką daro amerikiečiai. Ir jeigu jie mato, jeigu jie supranta, kad Trumpas pataikauja jiems ar Lukašenkai, vieną dieną, vieną gražų rytą gali karinė prasme padaryti milžinišką kvailystę, ką jie padarė Ukrainai, jie gali įsiveržti į Baltijos šalis, nebūtinai tai bus milžiniškas įsiveržimas, gali būti kažkoks dalinis įsiveržimas, kuriam rusai norės tikėtis, kad NATO gal nesureaguos. Šitos pusiau gal hibridika, gal mes kažko nesupratom, bet 5 straipsnis jau nebeveiks. Tai toks yra rusų tikslas. Bet aš manau, ir tą daugybė amerikiečių pabrėžė, Baltijos šalis turi didžiulį vardą Amerikoje, tik tai reikia, kad apie jį visi girdėtų. Ir pabaigsiu tuo, kad matai, kai tikėtina Trumpas praras kongresą, jo prezidentūra, kaip ir pasakė Kurtas tinklalaidėj, jis padvigubins savo radikalų veikimą, jinai taps absoliučiai asmeninė. Tai tas priėjimas prie Trumpo mums lietuviams tampa kosmiškai svarbus. Kol kas mes prieinam per tokius kongresmenus, Marijų ir kitus, bet mes neprieinam prie Trumpo ir kol kas tai mane gazdina. Tai yra esminis uždavinys Lietuvai, nepaisant visų mūsų spalvų, ir kada šita beviltiška vyriausybė nusimes tos savo radikalus, galbūt tai įvyks. Bet jie tada turi suprasti, kad šitas žaidimas su žemaitaičiais ir visais kitais radikaliais kvailiais, mums gali baisiai daug kainuoti. Nes mes kol kas dėl būtent šito mūsų kvailumo, bukumo ir radikalumo mes nepatekom į Vašingtoną.
Būtent. Ir ta nata, kad ir kaip dažnai atrodytų sunku išlaikyti tą viltį, aš vis dar ją išlaikau, žiūriu ir labai viliuosi, kad laisvas pasaulis laimės, kad ir kaip tai kartais atrodytų sunku ar net neįmanoma, bet per tą sunkų įdirbį, kurį jūs dedat ir mūsų diplomatinis korpusas ir bendrai per tuos visus ryšius, kuriuos turime Amerikoje ir per diasporą ir panašiai, mes turime nuolatos kovoti už Lietuvą ir už laisvą į pasaulį. Taigi, ačiū Jums, Žygi, ir linkiu klausytojams dar neišsijungti serijos ir tikrai pasiklausyti ateinančių pokalbių. Taigi, ačiū Jums labai ir iki sekančio.
Okay, Kurt, we are in Miami and we just had a panel about how worse it can actually get. And I liked your prediction that it can get actually much worse. Can you explain it to the Lithuanians?
There are lots of things that can get worse than they are now. It doesn't mean that they will. I would actually predict that they won't. But I think that you could have any number of things happen. You could have Trump implement his desire to pull out of NATO or weaken U.S. commitment to NATO. You could have Putin try to stir up something in the Baltic states to test how NATO reacts, and that may not be a good answer from NATO. You could have more difficulty in the European Union getting their act together than they expect now that Orban has been defeated. It still may not work. You could have some negative turn in the war, Russia's war against Ukraine. You could have continued high oil prices, which will give Putin a monetary windfall. China could be concerned if Putin looks like he's losing. China could step in and provide financing for Putin and help them survive this. So there are any number of things that could go wrong. Now, that being said, I don't think they will. My best judgment is that those scenarios are possible and we have to prepare for them and not be complacent. But the most likely outcome is that Putin will be Putin. He will overdo things. He will continue his war. He will continue hybrid attacks in Europe. He will continue his information campaigns. And this will at least keep the American people and the US Congress vigilant. It'll keep Europeans vigilant. It'll help the EU stick together and do what they need to do. And Ukraine is actually, I'd say it's too much to say that they're winning the war, but the war has turned in their favor.
Exactly.
They have figured out how to use offensive drones better than Russia. They've figured out how to take down Russian drones in a cost-effective way. They have survived the worst winter, and it's going to be better going forward. They have started turning opinion in the global south, particularly the Gulf states, who realize that Putin is on the wrong side and his equipment doesn't work very well, and Ukrainian stuff does. So that's good. And Trump will face domestic opposition if he really tries to damage NATO. And that's from the public, that's from Democrats, it's from Republicans, House and Senate. He cannot just destroy NATO and have people passively sit by in the US. So for all those reasons, I don't think those terrible outcomes are likely. And something better is likely, but we have to watch out for them.
Okay, next most popular question to you was what will happen after midterms? And I will add my little question. Do we have a chance of Republicans like you coming back on the blogs? Because we are all Republicans here, and we love Reagan, Bush, anything you did, but it kind of normal bipartisan way, and actually Europe is not your enemy, Brussels is not your enemy. You created us, you made us more American in Europe. So do you think there is a chance of some kind of America standing with us? Finally?
I think in the long run, yes. I think Trump is an aberration in American politics, and I think there will be a pendulum swing away from the volatility and the vulgarity and the pettiness and the personal interests that he pursues. I think there'll be a pendulum swing away from that. But for the remainder of his term, I don't see it. And that's because his second term is very different from his first term. And as you know, I served in the first term. In the second term, he has deliberately avoided bringing in people with expertise, with relationships, with knowledge, people who can advise him, people who can anticipate problems and plan ahead. He doesn't want that. He wants people who are loyal to him and who do what he says. And he is going to make all the decisions on his own. He just shoots, from the hip. He has gut instincts. He thinks he knows better than everybody else. He thinks that he reads people, he reads situations, he can handle things. So it's a very different, very personal administration, if you can even call it an administration, rather than the way it was in any normal U.S. administration. That's not going to change. And in fact, I would argue after the midterms, that trend will be even bigger.
That's exactly what you said yesterday, that he might double down on foreign policy.
Yes.
How would actually world look like that?
So first off, the Republicans are almost certainly going to lose the House of Representatives. This will lead to lots of public investigations in the House into Trump's finances, the emoluments clause, his family business profiting from his presidency, profiting himself from his presidency, bad judgments made or bad actions taken by members of his cabinet. It's going to be a series of investigations aimed at embarrassing Trump and damaging him politically. And he will fight all of this. He never backs down from a fight, so this will become a very tough domestic political fight. It also means that with Democrats in control of the House and possibly even the Senate, he won't get any legislation through. That his ability to pass a budget or to get anything done through the Congress is now over. And that means he will turn to foreign policy where he has the authority as president to act more unilaterally. And he is likely to do that. And he finds that the military follows him, takes orders, does what he wants them to do. So that's the step over here. The military takes orders, they do what he wants, and that's tempting for him to then, take bold strokes in foreign policy, dictate things, have everybody react to him in ways that he couldn't really do domestically anymore.
My last question, Kurt, because I'm living, 30 kilometers from border with Belarus and then Russia, and how would this actually affect American policy towards Lukashenko regime, Putin regime? Because until now we're kind of questioning, is it really American to appease those dictators? And 250th anniversary is approaching, and it seems that America is appeasing, last surviving empire in Europe.
Yes. Look, it's undeniable that under President Trump, the U.S. has aligned itself more with Russia for whatever reasons. We can always speculate what they are, but clearly it's aligning. It doesn't want to impose sanctions. It has lifted sanctions that it did impose in order to let oil through, which of course props up the Kremlin finances. Putin always dangles business deals in front of Trump and Witkoff and Kushner, and Dmitriev does that. That's by design because they think that will influence their behavior, which it seems to. And they like to see themselves as deal makers, and that Russia has a lot of natural resources and a lot of money, so there's deals to be made. I think that they would see themselves as deal makers in reconciling with Lukashenko and saying, you know what, we have a great relationship, we drink vodka together, we release some political prisoners, let's lift sanctions, let's buy fertilizer, I could see that. So it is troubling that the foreign policy of President Trump in Europe is devoid of a moral compass. It's really not about authoritarians and freedom. It's about transactions and deals and cultural wars inside Europe, right culture, conservative ideals versus the liberal agenda. That's important to them. But when it comes to aggressors, dictators, tyrants, oppressors, they treat them all equally.
Okay, Kurt, we really hope that normal Republican policy will be able to come back, because we are not used to those kind of Republicans. We are used for Republicans who are calling, last communist empire's ashes
Yes.
of history and trying to destroy it. And I think that's a long-term policy of America.
It's our values and it's our interests, as John McCain would have said. And it's where America will come back to. But we are going through a period now of a self-centeredness, both in the person of the president and in the nation's behavior, that is not really American.
But with all the criticism, what I said today publicly, thank you, Kurt, for bringing us to NATO, because if not NATO, I think Russia would attack Baltic states.
They
not
would have
Ukraine
done
today.
already. There is
Yeah.
no doubt about it. The only reason that Putin has not attacked the Baltic states or others is because you are in NATO. And one of the reasons he did attack Ukraine is because they're not in NATO.
Exactly. Thank you, Kurt. Thank you
Good
so
to
much.
see you, Zigis.
Great. Thank you. Wonderful. Okay, David, you spoke yesterday about Belarus passionately, and and also about Russia. You said that in case U.S. administration continues this appeasement with Russians might misinterpret it, and they might attack Europe because they are not afraid of Europeans. So how do you see this strange policy towards Lukashenko, dismantling of the sanctions? Though we created it with you, is it really, does it correspond to American long-term interest? What's happening here? Maybe Trump wants really to detach Lukashenko from Putin, and he's very wise, though we don't see it like that, because all the attempts of European leaders to do it failed.
I give credit to the Trump administration and to John Cole in particular for securing the release of political prisoners. When you can get people out of prison who should not be in prison in the first place, that's an accomplishment. You and I did that back when we were in our respective governments. We focused on that 2006 to 2008. That is a good thing. However, it's really important for the U.S. administration to understand that Lukashenko is undoing bad things that he has done. He is not doing good things. He's undoing bad things. And he still is putting people in prison. He still is harassing people. He is still forcing people who have been released, although fewer than before, into other countries, including Lithuania. He isn't allowing them to stay in Belarus. And so we have to understand that the nature of the Lukashenko regime has not changed. That's why I think it would be a serious mistake for President Trump to meet with Lukashenko. Lukashenko has not earned that. Even having him on the board of peace is a bit of a joke, because we have to remember that Lukashenko allowed the Russian forces to use Belarus to launch the attack against Ukraine back in February of 2022. So Lukashenko remains in power. He's been there now for 32 years. He is the longest serving dictator in Europe. He's not the only dictator in Europe, but the longest serving one. And we have to understand that as long as he is there, Belarus doesn't have a chance of moving in a more democratic direction. So we have to continue to secure the release of people who shouldn't be in prison. That's really important, but we shouldn't get carried away with that and then try to conduct a normalization policy with a dictatorial regime.
Do you think Putin is using him like litmus test of, warming up relations with Russia? Because if you do it with Lukashenko, why not with Russia? He's just a Russian vassal state.
I think there's a possibility of that, and but Lukashenko has a history, as you know very well, Žygis, of playing the West and Russia off of each other. This is what he's been doing for decades, and we have to be careful not to fall into that trap. And so whether Lukashenko is doing this with Putin's blessing, Putin probably appreciates it as long as the leash doesn't get too long.
Exactly.
Putin has Lukashenko on a very tight leash, and he's got to yank it back if he feels that he needs to. So I think that there are games being played by both Putin and Lukashenko that we have to be very careful of. These are games you and I experienced. These are games after we both left our respective governments that others have experienced. and this administration needs to understand that they continue to play these games.
Last question, David. As Lithuanians, we had a dream of if Americans are really engaging with Russians and Lukashenko, one of the goals has to be to remove Russian military machine from Belarus. Like, do you think we can convince Trump and, American administration that with a final settlement, if one day we have of peace, between Russians and Ukrainians, Russians are withdrawing their military machine from Belarus, because we don't see how you can do any talks with a country that is de facto occupied by Russians.
Exactly, and this is what you talked about yesterday in your remarks, Žygis, that Russia is occupied Belarus. I mean, it is essentially a takeover of Russia, of Belarus, and we have to be very aware of that. Russia used Belarus to launch the full-scale invasion of Ukraine. Russia is moving weapons systems into Belarus in order to justify, if you will,
Testing Baltics and Poland.
Testing Baltics, threatening your country and others. So this is a situation where Belarus cannot be truly free and independent unless Russia leaves Belarus and respects Belarus's independence and sovereignty and territorial integrity. And that's true for Ukraine, it's true for Moldova, it's true for Georgia. But Russia thinks Belarus is part of Russia, essentially. This goes back, by the way, to Yeltsin period. This isn't just something, it goes back, obviously, to the Soviet period, but it goes back to the Yeltsin period. It isn't just new with Putin, but it is a dangerous situation that if we simply accept the status quo, that will not be good for Belarus, it won't be good for Ukraine, it won't be good for your country, and it won't be good for the United States.
Okay, David. Let's hope that one day we make Belarus free and part of our European world, but it means consistency and pressure. Thank you, David, for
Always
Okay, Damon, we are now in Miami in this annual conference about freedom and global democracy, and today you made a great speech. I liked linking defense, our common defense, with freedom. You said this is the element that is missing. For some reason, maybe, I don't know, new generations, new politicians, they lost the essence of our alliance. Freedom.
Žygis, that's exactly right. If you're sitting in Vilnius or you're sitting in Miami, you understand that freedom is about security. If you're in Vilnius or you're in Miami, you know that everything that is dangerous comes from a dictator in Belarus, comes from a thug at the Kremlin. If you're sitting in Miami, you understand the challenges, the pain, the security challenges that we have coming from authoritarianism in Cuba and Nicaragua and Venezuela. It leads to illegal immigration. It leads to conflict. It leads to challenges to our citizens. You understand that in Vilnius. You understand that in Miami. What that means is that freedom is the expansion of freedom is the recipe for security. And if we want peace, if we want security, if we want prosperity, we have to put the advance of freedom, the expansion of freedom, the support of freedom at the heart of our foreign policies. The support for freedom is the most cost-effective and efficient national security strategy. You get it if you're sitting in Vilnius. You get it if you're sitting in Miami. And what's happening right now in Washington and Brussels, we're forgetting that. And so we need people like you, Žygis. We need people like our Cuban friends here in Miami to remind American policymakers, to remind European policymakers, only with the advance of freedom do we actually attain long-term security.
Okay, Rosa, María Payá, can you say a few words about you and why you think Lithuania made the right thing to support, freedom in Cuba, and what we should expect this year? Will the miracle happen and we will finally do it in Cuba?
I'm convinced. I'm convinced because the Cuban people have been fighting for 67 years, and because we finally have the right allies. And I mentioned this with some of a heavy heart, because the Lithuanian people and our Lithuanian friends have been with us during the whole time, the whole battle with us, and sometimes have been with us alone, because when no one else in Europe raised their voice, our Lithuanian friends raised their voice for freedom in Cuba, as they are doing it now. The good news is that the U.S. government, President Trump and Secretary Rubio, are finally taking action and bold initiative in support of freedom for Cuba, which is supporting the demand of the Cuban people. Because what we have to understand today is that for Cubans, especially for Cubans in the island, the only way to overcome the humanitarian catastrophe, the humanitarian crisis that communism created, is to end the regime. So for us, for the Cuban nation on and off the island, to finally transition towards a free republic is an existential matter today. And that's why there are more than 1,000 political prisoners. That's why mothers and teenagers are every night in the streets, pounding bombs and chanting for freedom, because freedom is our only way out. And the Cuban opposition, the Cuban civic organizations on and off the island, we are united around a plan to lead our nation from the totalitarian catastrophe toward the point in which we could have free, fair, multi-party elections for first time in over 70 years. So we need solidarity, we need support. We're having so from the US, and we hope that with the help of our Lithuanian friends, the European nations will do the right thing and will join the US in this effort.
Thank you, Maria. We will try to collect the best of our forces in Europe. Small Lithuanian nation will do whatever we can to support your transition, because we hate those communists who did so bad, to your wonderful country. They did it with us, and finally, it might reach there. And I will meet tomorrow with Mario Diaz-Balart. I remember late Lincoln, who was always thinking to return to its free Cuba, but maybe you will realize his dream. And thank you for that.
Thank you.
All
Thank
those
you so
efforts.
much.
Okay.